Hello friends, I trust this finds you happy, healthy, and prospering. Henry Ford once said, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. What this is all about is the idea of the perception of the self, which has had years to either thrive or ferment. Today we're going to take a deeper dive into the understanding of the idea of perceptions.
Well, first of all, I'd like to talk about what's the difference between perspective and perception. Well, perspective is a point of view, and perception is a point of reference. We can think, and sometimes it's kind of confusing, so I like to think of this perspective as being a spectator in the situation, and perception as being the understanding what is going on. Because perspective is a framework that we use to look at things. Each of us has his or her own perspective of things and of life in general, because each of us occupies a unique physical space that only we can occupy and nobody else can. Perception is the interpretation one gives through awareness. It's an understanding and gaining an insight to what we have seen. And I love that word, insight. We have perspective, which is an outer view of the world, and we have perception, which was an inner understanding of what's going on around us in our environment. I've talked many times about how the brain works. And the brain receives a sensory information, sensory input, through receptors such as the eyes and the ears, and actually all the five senses. And then it passes that information through the memory banks for understanding and acceptance. There's so much information all around us, and there's so much information that flows through our five senses into the brain that the conscious awareness can't accept all of it because it's too vast. And so therefore the brain sifts through all of that information and decides what is real and what's not real, what's important, what's not important, and only allows us a small percentage of that into our actual conscious awareness. So you can understand that perception can actually block or change our perspective by only allowing in small parts. Perception gives meaning to what we have seen, and we provide that meaning unconsciously. Yes, perception depends on complex functions of the nervous system, but subjectively seems mostly effortless and timeless because this processing happens outside of our conscious awareness. Remember, it happens before it actually enters into our consciousness. The brain sifts through all that information before we actually are aware of it. Perception is shaped by the recipient's learning, memory, expectation, and attention. Perception to life is when we understand and are aware of different perspectives, have gone through different experiences, and based on them, we create our own interpretation and our own insight. Perception creates, therefore, an individualized perspective of life. We need to experience different perspectives that help us create our personal perception. We take in a lot of information and decide what is true for us and create our belief systems upon that. The definition from Latin for perception is the organization, identification, and interpretation of sensory information in order to represent and understand the presented information and the environment in which we live. Perception is not about embracing a single perspective. It's more of a collation of different ideas and values and attitudes and experiences which give rise to insight, that inner knowing. You probably remember hearing that saying, seeing is believing. Well, according to this principle, we're actually turning that saying around and saying believing is seeing. Or as we quite often say in New Thought teaching, thoughts held in mind produce after their kind. That which we hold to be true about us is what actually experiences in our environment, because that which we perceive is actually what passes into our conscious awareness. So where are you in terms of your willingness to receive or accept greater good, greater possibilities, all the good of the universe? Remember that willingness to receive and accept will affect both your perception and your perspective.
And I always enjoy listening to your perspectives and perceptions. In the Gospel of Thomas, it is written, if you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you. What is within you is your personal spark of divinity, being created, as you are, by the most masterful artist of life. In Signs of Mind and Spirit, we learn to bring that what is within us to the surface through persistent, constructive thoughts. We learn this way of thinking is the most effective and greatest power known. Our personal perceptions of God, of life, and of ourself drive our thought, our thinking. And these thoughts play over and over in our mind throughout the day, impressing their likeness into our daily lives. Doctors Waldman and Newberg, both world-renowned for their neuroscientific research on spirituality and consciousness, wrote that brain scan research documents that prayer and meditation can literally change the way our brains perceive reality, allowing our thoughts to change our actions, behaviors, and relationships to others. Prayer and meditation are forms of thought. Become a master artist of your own thinking. Create your own reality. Let's consider our preconceived ideas or our perceived ideas of God. And so I invite you to consider, what is this? Obviously, if I put this out for you, you are saying that's your hand. Yes, it is my hand. But we must recognize the idea of no hand in order to define hand. So there is a duality in form. There is hand and no hand. To view God as one particular man, or the idea of God being anthropomorphic, the man in the sky, gives God one form. So there would be God and no God, which of course can't be absolute, since God is all that is. God being all that exists means that God is both form and unformed substance as possibility. We, as human beings, see through the eyes of God. We feel through the heart of God. We work through the hands of God. We live through the beingness of God. And we think through the mind of God, the eternal mind. God has a nature or qualities. The qualities of God are imbued within each one of us. These qualities include loving kindness, peace, joy, abundant life, bliss, and beauty. These are our natural inheritance, our natural state of being, our divine birthright. And so this week I invite each of you to spend some time thinking the thoughts, the prayers that move you toward a perception of the life you love. Make it your reality.